good morning, and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and Disembodied Hands, Quindy, Justin, and John. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Shadow Raven is alive. Well, that's good. That's actually one of the things that I was thankful for this morning. Not that you were alive, but that I was alive. My little 100 days gold journal makes me write down things I'm thankful for in the morning. D. Clearman at the 32 months. Insane. This man is crazy. I should know. Yep. He's been with us long enough, right? We should all know. Yeah, no more food poisoning. Yeah, let's not do that. Food poisoning bad. Who's food poisoning? Is it Shadow Raven? Is that why he's alive? Barely? Certifiably. Yes. All right. All right. We're on this dude. We're doing this dude. I think we're gonna go for the gold today and some leather. Yeah. I think I might have to switch some things around. Oh no. Yes, pizza, it's evil. Pizza's evil. I learned that in college. So when I found out I couldn't eat it anymore, it was okay. Food poisoning is not far off, huh? Yeah, with my gut issues, I have to avoid, like, even slightly off food will set me off, so. Alrighty, let us see. So I was just looking at that canteen, and I was debating what I wanted to have, if I really wanted it to be that way, or if I wanted a metal canteen with a leather strap surrounding it. It'd be a little harder to do. I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to do everything else and figure it out. Yeah, now they do gluten-free. They still don't do low carb, though, and tomatoes are my antithesis, so cannot have tomatoes. They will kill me. So, yeah. And I'm not a big fan of Alfredo sauces, so that pretty much means pizza, unless it has pesto, and then it's, like, super high calorie. So I just can't win, really. Of course, pizza in any form is high calorie, right? Let me see here. Let's work on our gold. Where is did I take my gold in the other room? Of course I did a double check before I got on, but that doesn't help. 1 second while I grab my rich leather. It's hard to do NMM gold without appropriate colors. Seriously. Pizza is like the huge double whammy, though, nutritionally. Tons of fat, tons of carbs, tons of calories. Nightshades for those of us who, can't have those. Yes. Actually, breakfast pizza is good. I give you that. But I like breakfast in most forms. So, all right, let's get this gold stuff figured out. And I'll stare at that canteen a little while longer and try to figure out exactly what I want to do with it. But I do think maybe the canteen itself needs to go to silver, and then or some other white metal, and then the strap needs to be leather instead of the way I did it. I suspect I was blocking things in and not thinking too much at the time. But that's not a huge thing to be hard. Done with the brat diet. I do love brats every once in a while. David makes them. He grills them for me. Alrighty, so let's get some darks in here. I need my russet brown. I want to go a little lighter with the gold here. So you've got some choices with gold. You can shade it pretty dramatically. But here I've already got a lot of very dramatic light and dark with this guy. So I don't know that I want my gold to be lighter. That's kind of why I went with that lighter base coat. Dear brats. Oh, iffy. Bambi is so tasty. You can all hate me for that comment, but Bambi is so tasty. I mean, so cute, but so tasty. it's like the quandary. It's like, you know, coming to terms. Like, I love duck, and I still haven't come to terms that ducklings are essentially nature's snack food. So many animals love baby ducks, and I can't blame them because I love duck. So yeah, it is like that kind of like half and half thing, right? But I grew up in Wisconsin, and the deer population there gets out of control if it's not hunted. So I guess I had that attitude with deer coming into it. So I felt a slight quandary about Bambi, but only slight. I do love venison. Yeah, I do venison chili, actually. Cranston. You had to deer a decent amount as a kid, and now you just don't know, right? Yeah, it can happen. Your mindset can certainly shift. Where is my awesome new... No, that's not my awesome new color. No, that's not my awesome new color. Yay! Remember, we're using torchlight to lighten our gold. Yeah, I love venison. I won't make chili without venison. So even though it's expensive here, I buy it. I buy it if I'm going to make chili. And I do a mixture of, I do the Texas mix. We always, the deer in Texas are pretty gamey, so they always do a 50-50 mix with ground beef. So that's what I do for my chili. Which I may end up making when David's parents are here. I wasn't sure if we were going to do that. But it means I need to pick up extra jalapenos at the store today, because jalapeno cornbread, like, why make chili if you're not going to make jalapeno cornbread? All right, I want a little bit more yellow. I think I want some lantern yellow there. Yes, always put bacon in chili. I mean, I do it the Julia Child way. Like, she didn't do chili, but like whenever you do a beef stew, you start with bacon and it adds that additional flavor. I totally do that. Yeah, I make Texan chili iffy. Because I can't have tomatoes. Actually, I really love chili, like I always have since I was a kid. And I didn't realize, because I come from Wisconsin, I did not realize there were places that did not make chili with tomatoes. So when I went to Texas and I realized that Texan chili does not usually utilize tomatoes, that was like so happy for me. Like, I could have chili again. So I learned to make Texan chili with just roasted peppers instead of tomatoes. And I love it. I absolutely, and of course I do it venison, half venison, but that's, that was my happy place when I realized I can make a really kick-ass chili and not use tomato. Because roasted red peppers, like, honestly, give it the same kind of chunky body, and it gives it that kind of sweet and tart flavor. So that was my happy breakthrough on my, tomato-free diet. But yeah, so then you do the jalapeno cornbread, which is the best part, of course. Well, not the best part, but you know. Skyline chili. What else is in that, Iffy? I've never heard of it. Any chili that's no tomatoes, it has my interest. I'll have to write it down. Skyline chili. Ah, Cincinnati style. Okay. I'll look. Yeah, right, yeah, you're the opposite of me, Shadow Raven, if you can't do chili peppers. See, spicy doesn't really upset my guts, which is kind of a blessing, because a lot of things do. But I can still do, and honestly, I don't use super hot peppers. Like, I don't like things that are super hot. So most of the peppers that go into my chili are going to be things like poblano and jalapeno, and usually one Anaheim, because I really like the flavor of Anaheims. So as we mix our colors for the gold, We've got our russet brown, we've got our rich leather, and we've got our torchlight with a bit of lantern yellow in it. These colors, this one had a bit of torchlight in it, and the russet brown didn't, but I mixed the russet brown, and then I mixed my brush into this without rinsing it, and now I've got this color on my brush, and I'm going to mix that into the torchlight without rinsing it. And what that's going to do is it's going to make my mid-tone yellow here just a little less bright. Gold is very yellow, but it isn't like, sunshine yellow, so it has a little bit of muted color to it. So that's why I always mix a little bit of my rich leather into my other yellow. Oh, they just don't digest well. Got it. Yeah, well, and I use tamarind in place of tomatoes. If I need the flavor for something that calls for tomato sauce, I will use tamarind instead. That's something I picked up from Indian cooking that really made my life easier, is you can get that little bit of sourness, a little bit of tartness that you get from tomatoes that are cooked, like tomato paste. You can get that with tamarind. So I do a bunch of different things to kind of sub for that, because usually tomatoes are giving you a little bit of the acid that you need. But there are other ways to get that in a food. So, we will miss you, Iffy. Oh, I love cinnamon, allspice, and cloves. Yeah, that's a chili that I really, really like. I'm gonna make a note that it's Cincinnati in case I have to. Cincinnati chili. In case I have to look up other alternate recipes. Excellent. Yeah, we're talking food, because I have to go to the grocery store after this, and I'm trying to remember all the stuff that I need to put on my list. Which, actually, I need to throw something onto it right now, because it just, I need to pick up lamb. Because speaking of chilies, the one thing David's parents are kind of foodie, so they like really good food, and of course David has told them that I cook, so now the pressure's on, right? So I'm making one of my favorite things for them this time, which is my cinnamon curry lamb stew. It's kind of a African / East Indian versions of it. I guess it's kind of mostly Moroccan, but it's like traveled a little bit. So, but it's obviously, it's got cinnamon and curry and lamb in it, and it is fantastic. It's actually one of the favorite things I make, and David really loves it too. So we'll see how they think about it. Yeah, I wouldn't serve it over spaghetti. Like, I'm a total heathen turgeon. Since I'm low carb, I always serve chili over cauliflower rice. I pretty much serve everything over cauliflower rice. I was messing around with the miracle noodles, but then they started really reacting with my digestion. I guess, like, when you have IBS, like, introducing a non-digestible thing to your digestive tract is not really a good idea. Oops. So for a while I could tolerate them, but lately I just notice I can't. So now it's all cauliflower rice all the time, baby. Which is actually good because I love cauliflower rice. But yeah, cinnamon curry lamb stew, one of my favorite things. And over the holiday, at least, I will have time to make it. Because it's one of those long cooking stews, because lamb takes a while to break down. So we're adding in our russet brown, and it's thinned. We're kind of adding it into shadows. And first I'm just dealing with shadows in obvious places, like underneath areas where it would not get light. I'm low carb Shadow Raven, so it's got to be cauliflower rice for me, but the rest of the people at the table usually have basmati, or if we don't have basmati, we have jasmine. Traditionally, with the cinnamon curry lamb stew, it's supposed to be jasmine rice and a bit of mango chutney. And I picked up fresh mango chutney This is the advantage of the Bay Area, is the high Indian population. I picked up fresh mango chutney at the farmer's market yesterday on my way back from my writing group meetup. I'm going to put shadows on the sides here. But I'm not going to make them go all the way down because this is gold. And so we're going to have a reflection going on. Yeah, riced cauliflower. Essentially, if you only just nuke it, it's going to taste like cauliflower. But if you put it in a pan with a little bit of avocado oil and you stir fry it until it starts to brown, it's like when you deep fry cauliflower, that awesome flavor it gets, and it doesn't taste like at all like raw cauliflower anymore. That's what you get when you brown it in a pan. It's just so good. So yeah, that's what I use. It's my rice substitute for low carb. But yeah, the trick is definitely to brown it in a pan with some oil. I use a nonstick pan, just a little bit of avocado oil, and I use some salt. Yeah, I love curry. Yeah, and that's the sad thing about low carb is that I actually do love different kinds of rice. I let myself have a little bit of David's usually, but I'll mix it into my cauliflower rice. I'll just have a tiny bit. Okay, that got a little bit out of order there. That end of the dagger is a little bit unclear. So I'm going to grab some brown liner and kind of put a heavy shadow there. When you've got part of a sculpt that kind of runs into another part of the sculpt, you can put a heavy shadow there to kind of force the idea that the weapon actually ends and it doesn't kind of run into the detail next to it. Sometimes this happens, like with metal as well as with anything else. Usually don't see it in resin. It won't happen in styrene unless they've kind of done a shoddy sculpt. But, you know, sometimes you are going to get some details that kind of, for one reason or another, molding process is usually the culprit. They'll just kind of like meld together like they didn't quite cast cleanly. And so you may have to do what we call paint plastic surgery. And just kind of put a little bit of a line where there should be one and then paint around it as if the thing is well sculpted or well molded, and you will be fine. The eye will usually just like not even look close at it unless you get somebody who's like looking really close at your details, they might notice it, but I'm not seeing any dropped frames, Quindy. I can run my speed test if you want. Let's see here. I have my Chrome up actually, so let me get a new window. And I'll run it just in case. New window. Speed test coming online and zoom. Running it. We are looking. We're looking at download. Download's fine, but we don't know about upload yet. I mean, it never hurts to kind of look. Yeah. Oh yeah, my upload's actually pretty good. Yeah, it's good. It's all right. Yeah, not the stream then. At least not my end. But, you know, I like to check. When people are having issues, I like to double check. Excellent. All right. So now I'm going to kind of look around and see. I do need to kind of fill in the eyeballs on this little skull necklace. Want to just do those dark. Whenever you've got a tiny piece of jewelry, everything that's the details that you need to stand out, you should do really dark, because when it's tiny... Oh, you're having issues. Interesting. Ah. Oh, right, because you're home. Just a reminder, I get my booster shot today, Quiddy, so I'll let you know how I'm feeling later tonight, probably on the Discord. If I feel crappy by the time I hit bed, that will be a sign that we may not have an and tomorrow. But I'm hoping that's going to go awesome. Because I would like to have energy tomorrow. So I am hereby telling the universe that I am up for shrugging that sucker off. I've totally missed getting these two little studs with gold too. But yeah, wherever you have little tiny details, just try to outline them with your liner when it's gold. The one exception I'm going to make right now is I'm not going to do these little runes in here yet. I'm going to wait until I have more of a basic highlight shadow midtone lined up. Hello, Eric. If you're new, welcome. We are, this is Reaper Miniature Streams, so we do Reaper models every day, and we work on a series of 6, and we swap back and forth. So today it's the Tiefling. And I'm setting up some gold non-metallic metals, so all these little kind of light yellow-brown areas are going to be metallic gold, or non-metallic gold, I should say. Just a bit achy? Yeah, I hope I'm like you. Yeah, my immune system is pretty darn potent, so I haven't been sick since I started. I kind of measure it from when I went keto, when I went ketosis diet, because I just noticed after that I just didn't get sick. Like, I would get a cold or a little bit of flu every once in a while before that, like once a year. All right, so we're taking our russet brown and we're going to make sure we've got our shadows really painted in nice and dark. Oh, nice, yeah. Yeah, we're watching School of Chocolate right now, which is a new reality show that's a French chocolatier chef who's known for doing amazing lifelike realism. And then he's got his class of students who are all like good chefs and good pastry chefs and or chocolatiers in their own right, but like not on his level. So it's really kind of cool. They do like competition type stuff, challenges. But yeah, it's amazing what people can do in chocolate. I kind of laugh a little bit sometimes because some of the things they struggle with is just like stuff that if you were a miniature painter, you'd like be like, oh yeah, that's how you get that to go together. But we have to remember that they're doing it out of chocolate, which is very different from using brass rod, right? And stuff like that. But yeah, it's really cool. Like, if I had time for another hobby, I might consider learning to sculpt with chocolate, because it does seem pretty darn cool. And I bet I would have a lot of fun with it. Plus, you can eat it. But that's probably the biggest problem. I've gained 20 pounds back. I don't like white chocolate, but I like the other chocolates. So, and you can still sculpt with those. I mean, white chocolate's just pretty much cocoa butter and sugar. And cream, I think, right? It lacks the cocoa powder that makes it real chocolate. Good chocolate. I'm biased. I'm not a white chocolate fan. I like it as dark as it goes. 90% dark, 80% dark, 85. 70 at the lowest. So we're going to put a little shadow right there because we've got a nice highlight on this turquoise edge right next to it. So putting a shadow there, it's kind of like, it's when I talk about comic book art, it's often what they do. They'll put a highlight next to a shadow to bring out areas. And so that's what I'm doing as well. I'm situating my shadows strategically. Yeah. We always joked that Reaper would get a food license and make chocolate miniatures, Eric. I'm not surprised there's a 3D chocolate printer. That would also be dangerous. I think I can be happy avoiding that level of danger. There. Alrighty. So I've trimmed up a little bit. I've got my brown liner out on purpose because if I do make some kind of fudgy areas where the detail's just not showing up, then I like to be able to correct it with my liner. So we're doing that. I'm going to keep blocking in shadows. Since I thinned this russet brown, you can see it's a little transparent where it falls off the side here. I'm building up more than one layer of it usually. And then I'll take my mid-tone and kind of blend it over the edge if I feel like I got a little bit too much of a demarcation line and I want a little bit more of a blend. The only time you get really hard transitions from highlight to shadow in NMM is when a metal is very shiny, like a chrome. That's what people call sky earth. So essentially, the more sudden the transition from light to dark on your model, the more it will read as very shiny metal. But then you have to be dead on with your shadows and highlights to get it to look right. Otherwise, it will look just wonky. Like it'll kind of look like metal, but then there'll be like issues and you won't be sure what. And yeah, so usually for people who are new to metallic, to non-metallic metals, I do not recommend Sky Earth. It is very difficult even for me, and I paint a lot of NMM. But once you have your head wrapped around NMM and you're pretty good on any surface on, say, a 28mm model and slightly larger, then you can start scaling up. Oh, excellent, Eric. Yeah, so the strength of the porcelain palette is that it'll let you learn paint consistency faster. So when you mix up your initial puddles, go like 4-to-1, like train yourself to kind of always default, and then mix up maybe a 2-to-1 and kind of experiment with them and see like the difference, right? The difference in opacity, how thin of a line can you draw, you know, like how much more solid is this, you know, how about this color? It'll essentially let you dial that in a little bit much, especially if you teach yourself to default to like when I start my paint in my palette, I'm always mixing 4-to-1. And if I am mixing a highlight, I'm always defaulting to 2-to-1. So 4-to-2 usually. I always start with 4 drops of paint or a little bit more. Usually, since I'm doing more than one color, I'm doing 4 drops of my initial color plus 1 drop of white or 1 drop of yellow or 1 drop of whatever. So often I start with 5 drops of paint and at least 2 drops of water if I'm mixing like a highlight. If I'm base coating, it's more 4 or 5-to-1. So but the nice thing is you want to make bigger paint puddles. You don't want to just put 1 drop of paint down ever. You want more paint rather than less, because the advantage of this is that it's going to limit the amount of evaporation that happens because it limits the amount of surface area. So build big paint puddles, and then once you have it dialed in to where you need it, it'll stay that way for a good hour without you having to worry about it. Unless you live in a really arid climate, then you might need to add a drop of water at some point, like at the 45-minute mark. But in general, I'm going to map in a little highlights here. So I'm taking my highlight color and I'm going to put it over the entire top of the surface. Or down here, all of this area where it is coming out. If you see it's kind of like bending out, it's going to catch the light down here because it's bending out. So I'm going to start just by blocking in a main highlight over the whole area, and then I'm going to make it lighter as it goes out. And I am going to tackle these runes as well, so we'll do that today. But first I want to get my basic NMM down. I don't want to worry about these runes because I don't want to have to paint in these runes and then paint around them. I'd rather just paint over the whole thing, get my basic highlight and shadow figured out, and then come back with brown liner and a pure white and work with the runes. But yes, the secret of using a well palette is big paint puddles. You've got plenty of drops of paint in all of those dropper bottles you own, so don't be afraid of quote-unquote wasting paint. It actually won't do you any favors. It'll actually make it harder for you to get good results. More shadow, this is actually not, but it is at the very beginning stages. This is how it looks. When you start with your dark, which I always do, I start with my mid-dark. So this is my dark, this is my mid-dark, this is my mid-tone. And then usually you've got 2 highlights at least. But if you start with this color, it will make your gold garishly yellow. And I hate that. So I always start with this, and then I work this color up. But it takes a little while to layer it up and get it to the point where you want it, right? Because you're putting it over a darker color, and it's a yellow. But I really prefer this technique to starting with a paler yellow, because it just goes too yellow for me then. But as I continue to layer up this yellow, keep in mind you're only looking at one layer of highlighting. You can always make your gold more intense. All you have to do is glaze it with like lantern yellow. So I go more muted out the gate by preference, because I know I can always bring it up, but it's such a pain to work with when it's too bright out the gate. Like knocking it down just feels harder to me, and so I don't do it. I just start muted. Yeah, it is nice and heavy, this palette. Especially I like put it on my construction paper here. It's really doesn't slide. So I'm going to slightly lighten things down here, because there's a little bit of a reflection. I will also bring in an even darker reflection on this gold once I have it like mapped. I want my first two colors though. But yeah, this is how I do all my NMM gold, no matter how bright it is. War Shadow, I start with the mid-dark. So one thing you should never do is judge any of my painting in its introductory stages. I used to like take crap about this when I was long time ago, before I even got good at the game store I used to work at, because I'd be like underpainting stuff and people would be like, are your horses really going to be green? You know, because I'd be using greens in my underpainting because I was painting wood elves. And it's just like, you can't judge it yet. And it's the same thing when I'm starting out with this gold. When you start dark and you work light, you really can't judge it until you get well into your midtones and highlights. Because I can bring this up as bright as I want. Uh-oh, I see a tiny mold line. And since it's on the higher surface, it's going to annoy me. So I'm going to take it off. It's a very tiny mold line. It looks like I like tackled it, but I didn't quite get all of it. But my knife will be good for this one. There, perfect. Easy. Easy peasy. And I have my midtone, so I can just paint over that. But yeah, I mean, the base rule I use with NMM is always to start darker and work lighter. War Shadow. And actually, Sergio does the same. I'll start mid-dark as well, on his silver and steel especially. So there are many. I don't know how Kirill does NMM. I don't know whether he starts mid-dark or where. I have his book around. I should look. He always starts, I always start metallics light as I possibly can for true metallics, but not with NMM. So your entire upper surface is going to be lighter, but you're still going to have some variation of light and shadow. You're just not going to go as dark with your shadow. Well, they can judge it, but they'll be wrong. It's like, oh, this is going to be a really muted NMM, and puts a yellow glaze over it. Oh, I was wrong. You can make any assessments you want. You just be aware that you're probably incorrect. Everything changes so much as you highlight and shade it. And that needs a better transition there. So what I'm building here is highlight, shadow, and another highlight. This highlight is a reflection. The environment will be casting light back up at the underside of the metal. You can see it here. There's my ring light. You see the light on the top, you see the dark shadow under it, and then at the very bottom you see my skin color because it's reflecting the light. I can move my skin color back. It's still reflecting the light. See it? So it's not just that stuff gets reflected right up next to something, although if it is next to something, it has a better chance of reflecting the actual color of the thing instead of a general light. So like here on Templar, because this red is really close to her metal here, it's going to reflect. Whereas when you're dealing more with a light, just general lighting bouncing back, you're going to see more of just that metal. Yeah, you know what? You can do it that way of coffee. Like it's purely what works for you. For me, I get very frustrated at my NMM going way too yellow if I start on the lighter side. And I find it much harder to get like my painting and drawing in general. I find it much harder to force my darks where they need to be than to bring up highlights. I love highlighting, but I'm always a little bit like I feel like I'm often timid with shadows. And so I have to force myself to do it. So it's easier for me to do that if I start dark. But if you have the opposite problem, if you have like, especially if you start with a dark primer, like if you're used to doing that, then I could totally see how starting lighter would work for you. Just be aware of that when you're doing that. Yeah, you're gonna make your gold shift a bit toward really, at least if you're using a very yellow midtone, which I am. This, you're going to have a very, very yellow start to it. But yeah, it's going to vary. But I'm always have been so timid with my shadows that I find that at least on the metals, starting darker definitely makes me push it to where it needs to be. Makes it easier for me. And I see people struggle on both sides, I guess. I do see a lot of people, though, that don't have their shadows dark enough. Like, that's probably the number one problem with NMMIC when I judge competitions at ReaperCon and elsewhere. Or when I, like, give feedback for coachings on my Patreon. Is that people do not take their shadows dark enough. So starting darker can force you to do that as long as you don't overpaint all of it. Hello, Silver Tongue. Thanks for the resub. Yeah, cool. Thanks for the cred. Tell people to watch my stream. But I'm glad that it's been valuable to you. Like, this is why I do this. I do this to give you guys a leg up. And I don't hide the ball ever. Like, you guys see, especially if you watch like my own stream which is now on Saturdays, like I was doing very, very high level highlighting on the face this weekend. Oh, little piece of lint. You know, I don't hide like stuff. Like, you can get all my tricks off of this stream, my Patreon, and my other stream. So I don't believe in like keeping tricks to myself. Like that was a philosophy when I came into the hobby. Was there were some very top level painters that were like, oh, but I don't know if I want to teach. Everybody's going to learn all my tricks. And it's like, you know, and I knew this from being in art school. It's like you could do everything except hold the brush for them, and they still would do it different. Like, your students will always find their own way to do something. They're not going to be able to just duplicate exactly what you do, exactly the way you do it, but you're going to help them find their own way to do it. So that's why I teach. That's what I like to teach. Thank you for the Twitch shout out. Yes, I do accept shameless plugs, and my Patreon especially, because my Patreon pays like the food bill. Actually, I've been getting a lot of new patrons lately, so I have to say thank you, everybody. It always makes me happy. Like, when a new person comes in, and I can greet them and ask them what they'd like to learn. See what level everybody's at. I've gotten some really good suggestions lately for topics. So thank you, everybody. So I'm darkening down this transition because it needs to be a little darker. As I mentioned, a lot of the problem with NMM is a lot of people won't take it as dark as it needs to go. Thank you, Shidahari. I'm glad. And thank you for all of the links, Quindy. Yes, I have a Patreon. Yes, I have some exciting stuff coming up. I'm looking forward to it. I think January is going to be really good. So I'm going to lighten this central highlight here. Actually, one of the things that'll be coming up in January on my Patreon is highlighting cylinders. Because people seem to have trouble with cylinders. I used to have trouble with cylinders. And it definitely, like, things change a little bit depending on how reflective the cylinder surface is. And we run into cylinders all the time with mini painting. I mean, arms and legs and the armor over them. So I'm really going to block in more. There. Yeah, I mean, yellow is the other issue with yellow or shadow is if you go too heavy with it. If I had started lighter here, you would really distract the eye, right? Because it's a light, bright, warm color, and I need emphasis to stay here. So this yellow bracelet will help. This little skull, when I get to it in a second, will help. But I don't want to go too heavy with my yellow elsewhere. I do want the eye to travel, to hit the different, bits of yellow and travel around the model. That's always nice. It is a very distracting color, so you have to be careful with your gold NMM. And be careful where you put the highest concentration of it. If you have this big, heavy NMM gold border on the bottom of the piece and not a lot of light or yellow up top, everybody will stare at that, and they won't look at the rest of the model at all. But yeah, yellow is pretty overpowering on a piece, so... or it can be. But it's about building it up. Like, I think a lot of time people put down a color and they expect that color to just be static. And in reality, the color you put down is never how the color ends up. Because you're going to highlight it, you're going to shade it. And then people are so surprised when suddenly it doesn't look the way that they thought it was going to look. And it's like, well, when you highlight and shade, you cover up some of the original color that you put down. And the more of it you cover up, the more your color is going to shift. So for here, I'm doing fairly large highlights in the yellow, and so it's shifting toward that. But I'm keeping the shadows where I want them, and that's the important part for me. Plus, blocking in the shadows sometimes helps me envision better where my highlights are. This is a pretty simple model, and most of it's NMM placement. Yeah, aka how to do a Space Marine. Exactly, right? But that was hard. Like, when I first started trying to paint Space Marines Too Much Coffee, I remember how hard it was for me. Especially because the armor is supposed to be somewhat reflective, somewhat shiny, right? For a lot of chapters. I think that's part of why I liked painting Space Wolves. I mean, well, that and I love blue-gray. But it let me, like, paint something that I felt would probably be a little more dull and not as shiny. I always liked grittier Space Wolves. Whereas when you did, like, once I learned to layer, I loved doing salamanders because I love doing that bright emerald green up to yellow. Salamanders are my second favorite chapter, I think. Hated Black Templars. Blood Angels are fun if you like to paint red, and I do like to paint red, but you got to get that, like, candy apple or dark crimson shiny going on, which is not easy sometimes. I could probably paint a really good Blood Angel these days. I haven't painted one in eons. The most recent thing I painted as far as Space Marines was the Lehman Russ from Forge World, and that's up on my website. And my Instagram, actually. Which is Painting Big. And my website's paintingbig.net. I finished almost all my other pages on the paintingbig.net. And now I need to upload all my images. And then my website will finally be updated. I quit streaming on Thursdays so that I could make it a social media day. And I'm so happy with the amount of work that I'm getting done. The website desperately needed a revamp. I do need to add some things to the Patreon page. I need to add some examples of topics we've covered. All right. So getting the lantern, pretty much you're going to have this shadow falling over from the top of the hood. I'm going to do this kind of brassy. So gold metal is gold metal at 28 mil. So I could make it a little bit more dull, or I could just bring up things that I actually want to be gold a little bit brighter. But in general, bye, Eric. Yeah, thanks for stopping in. Plague Marines, man, those new models, they keep taunting me. But I need to start painting faster before I can take on painting more 28s. Like, there's just a lot of big models I still want to do. That was a little bit too much highlight there, especially because it's under the skull. Remember, when something is overshadowed, the only light that's going to hit your metal is reflected light. So you kind of want to look and figure out, well, what would likely get hit with just a little tiny highlight. It won't be much, just a tiny bit. All right. Hey there, Stefan's World. I am doing good today. I have a lot to get done before the end of the year. Some Patreon stuff might be late. I'm hoping not, but depends on how much I can get done. David's parents are going to be in town, and I'm sad because I'm going to have to work while they're here a bit. Other than that, though, hey, it's almost the end of the year. I always like New Year's a lot. I treat it as a time of reflection and looking at what I've accomplished for myself lately. And I feel like I've been a very good Anne this year. I feel like I've gotten my feet on a lot of things, and I'm starting to make progress on the things I care about. Which makes it 2021 a pretty good year. There we go. So I'm just making some highlights here on the dagger now. Miracle. Sorry that you've got pain. I feel it. Steven's World. I got my chronic back pain comes and goes. Hopefully you feel better. Only every painting session. I probably change it every like hour and a half, 2 hours. When I get up and stretch, Steven's World is when I tend to change it. It depends too on what I've been doing though. Like if I've been working with the wet palette and a big brush, and I'm essentially rinsing a lot of paint out of my brush, then I'll rinse it more often. I definitely have a cut point where I'm like, this is too dirty. Especially because I tend to go up to pure white on a lot of highlights for NMM and stuff. Then I really want that white to be white, and I don't want my water, because often, although I use my water bottle to add water to paints on my palette, I also add the rinse water every once in a while. So I don't want to take any chance on dimming that. So, and it's not a dumb question, actually. A lot of people are curious about that sort of thing. But yeah, so, I mean, I change it after every stream, so that's an hour and a half. I tend to have productive periods that are an hour and a half long. Like, I'll do 45 minutes or an hour. I'll get up, I'll stretch. I'll sit down again, after that 30-second break, and I'll go But after an hour and a half, I typically have to just take a break, either because of my back or because, you know, I've got other priorities that I have to work on as well. So hour and a half just tends to be the standard answer for me as far as resetting, because I like to kind of reset my area a little bit then, so that when I come back to it, it'll feel fresh to me. I like starting in a clean, organized area. All right, so let's get this. Oh, I've got a under reflection here. So this staff is bone, and it's going to be casting a highlight or a reflection onto the bottom of this metal for sure. So definitely come in there and add that little highlight here next to the staff. Going to have a fair amount of light coming back up there. Declarman and I have a very, very, I have over the years developed a plan that does not malfunction. It only malfunctions when I can't follow it, which is to always make sure that my paint water cup is very unique and or that my drinking vessel is very unique. The only time I get into trouble is at conventions where I have, you know, a generic water cup for my paint and another generic water cup for drinking out of. Then it gets dicey. But otherwise, I have my Yeti for my water cup, and I'm never going to touch that with a paintbrush. And I've got my Unikitty, my Lego Movie Princess Unikitty cup, because we love Unikitty. I love Unikitty. Unikitty is my hero. So yeah, my Unikitty cup for water. But I don't bring my Unikitty cup to cons because I don't ever want to lose it. So that's when it gets fraught with peril. But in general, I try to bring my Yeti to cons so that at least I can try to keep things from being dangerous. Yeah, I do that too, Carly. But sometimes I still mess it up if they look the same. Ha! Well, Angel's like serious, like mega, like hardcore. Like we would all love a little stream of fresh water piped onto our desk. Wouldn't that be nice, everybody? But some of us are just kicking it old school. Some of us don't have, you know, we don't want to rewire or I guess you could use a fountain. Man, I'm sure there are ways to do that. I bet you could use a fountain pump. I don't know. Anyway, it's crazy. I drink a lot of water, Stefan's World, so I try to always hydrate. So yeah, for me it is dangerous. Especially at a con where I'm talking so much, I'm drinking a ton of water. Can't have wine anymore, so that is not a danger. At least I won't dip my brush in my wine. So now see how the gold is coming up. Much different looking, isn't it now? I mean, it's still muted, but it's a lot more yellow. You can definitely see that it's coming up as gold. It's at least reading brass, I think, right now, which is excellent because that's what most things I imagine would be. Three water cups, huh? I don't use it. I do metallics so seldom, and honestly, I have never, ever, ever, in all my years of painting, ever run into the problem people tell about having metallic flake go into my regular paint if you don't use different rinse water. I've never had that happen, ever. And I suspect that the only way it would happen is if you don't change out your paint water very often. And I do change out my paint water often. So, as we've established. So I just never experienced it. I never had that happen to me. And knowing what I know about metallics and the amount of flake you need to have the sparkle show, I think that just casual rinsing, and then as long as you change your water out within an hour, you should be okay. Depending if you're using a bigger brush, you might get a bigger load, but yeah, I just never ran into it. All right, I'm just lining around those little gold studs at the top of the dagger there. Ah. See, I need to get up, so... Because getting up and stretching is part of keeping my spine okay with me. So, yeah, since I need to get up, I do not mind getting up to change the water. I'm going to get up and stretch at least every hour and a half at the very, very most. Like, usually I keep going through the stream and I don't stretch in the middle. Though I'm going to stretch today because my back's been a little bit for the last week or two. Usually when I tweak the back, looks like I might actually need to do a bit of gold up here. There's 2 sections to this handle. Interesting. Or I guess I could paint it like it's just... Yeah, I think I'm just going to paint it like it's a wrap. And not do that. So we'll do that. Yeah, and I never use brush soap, so... Because I abuse my brushes. And also I rinse compulsively. There we are. So we're getting all of our highlights down here. I'm just going to kind of look over it, double check it a little bit. Need to get the back sides of this. But I am actually going to stand up and stretch real quick. Yeah, I've just never had it happen, so I never, like, since it has never happened for me, Shadow Raven, that's, like, why I guess I don't even, like, it isn't even on my radar to worry about. And I'm a worrier. I'm going to get up and stretch real quick. Anybody else who wants to get up and stretch should do so. Take advantage of this opportunity. Lever myself out of my chair here. Do a stretchy thing. But yeah, I've just never... you need a lot of metallic flake to overpower a good dose of opaque base and pigment. It's more likely to happen probably when you're working with really transparent colors. If you use a lot of metallic flake and then you use that water to thin, you could get sparkles. The more transparent the paint you're working with, the more likely you get sparkles. And the more flake you've let get into your water. Many stretches. But yeah, as with anything, you do you. Whatever your system is, you know what? Whatever your system is, it's yours, and share it with people, and some people are going to find that it works great for them too. And some people aren't. And that's cool. Alright, there we go. Stretchies. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do my floor stretch real quick. Just to make sure. Then we'll be right back. I feel like I've been trying to do real planks, like not have my straight arms, but do them on my bent arms lately, and boy, that's hard. I feel like my back is sore just because it's been getting a workout. Alrighty, let's get the back side of this set, and then we're going to bring in some of our really paler highlights, and you're going to see the metal start to shine. NMM comes to life when you've got its highlights in, if you start with the shadows. And I may end up darkening my shadow. I need to put in a shadow back here, for sure. Also, for those of you who saw the bonus content video go up on the Patreon about the washes, I did put up a photo of the finished model so you can see how the wash dried. Actually, with liner, it dries very similar to how it is when wet, which is nice. That's why liners excel as washes. Now it's got a little bit of a rim around this bracer, so I am going to bring in some liner to accentuate that. I can further accentuate it with highlights. And if I get too heavy with it, I can always bring some of my rich leather over the top. And it didn't quite get taken up on this side. I missed it on the top side. It was a little bit less molded. There. All right, so now we've got that line there. Now we can highlight it accordingly. So it's almost time to mix our next highlight. Normally I mix everything at once, but I wanted to get going on this, so I didn't mix my highlights for this model yet, for this NMM. Ooh, eclipsed a little bit of that line, but that's all right. Now you still want a little bit of variation, see here, between highlight, shadow, highlight, but you don't want your shadow to be nearly as dark as it is on the underside. So speaking of cooking, the other night I actually made something I was super proud of. I actually did a port wine reduction and did seared duck breasts in cast iron. And I nailed the doneness and I nailed the port wine reduction, so it was super tasty. We have a bottle of port, and of course I can't drink it straight, but ooh, I can use it for cooking. I do love port. So that was gratifying, because duck breasts can be hard to nail the right temperature consistently. A little bit of highlights on the bottom. Now let's mix our next, actually no, sorry, I need to get this back here. One last little bit. It's always easy to forget like scabbards and crap. You're always like, I'm done. And then you're like, oh no, I'm not done. All right, so we've got that mapped in, got that line down. Now our midtone, and then we will mix our highlights. I also need to figure out, I think I'm just going to highlight like kind of the middle of this section. When you've got a long straight section, flat section with NMM, it can be difficult, but you kind of have to treat it like a sword. You kind of want to alternate light and dark. So here, because I know I'm going to have some light on the ends here, I'm going to go more light in the middle on that, I think. People are busy working, I can tell. Do you guys have all Christmas Eve off? We do. And do you have more days off? Some of you, I think, are even at home now, which is really nice. A bit of a highlight. Retired. Steven's World. I don't think I'm ever going to have every day off. I mean, being self-employed means that I'm pretty much working doing the stuff that I really enjoy. So unless everybody decides that I've got nothing left to teach, I think I'm probably going to be working for a good long time. I think artists and writers and creatives in general have it good that way, where we may scale back what we do as we get older, just so that we're not like working quite as hard. But I can't see myself stopping teaching painting unless the hobby tanks, which I don't think it's going to. We have so many new people coming in all the time. Thursday and Friday off is nice, Julia. David took Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off since his parents are coming. I feel a little bad about having to work, but they'll deal. Oh, you know it's not as bad as a corporate job. That honey-do list may be annoying, but it's just the stuff that you always wished you had time to deal with, and now you have time to deal with. That's what I treat my honey-do list, my personal honey-do list as. I'm always kind of relieved when I get a day off that I can work on it, where otherwise some things just slide. They always joke that the people joke that, you know, when they go to work for themselves, they're always like, my boss is a real jerk. I don't get hardly any days off. It's because you're always hardest on yourself, right? Alrighty. I need to remember to do that strap at the top of the quiver in brown. But otherwise, we have gotten our gold to gold/brass to a respectable level on all surfaces that... Oh, wait, I missed one. See, I cursed myself. I didn't spend 60 years painting. My improvement, Steven's World, the bulk of my improvement happened in 6 months. 6 months. 6 months when I quit my real job, moved to the East Coast, and spent 6 months painting for eBay and commission, trying every day to get a little better at whatever my topic of the day was. Whether I was working on a cape or a face or eyeballs or NMM or metallics or whatever, I tried every day to get a little bit better, and I worked over 40 hours a week, but you wouldn't have to. You could just work less than 40 hours a week and, you know, take a year to do it. But I went from a competent intermediate level painter that could sell decent painted stuff on eBay to a international award winner in 1 year. Because I put the time and effort in. So never ever let anyone tell you that you need to spend 40 years studying something. Focused effort trumps long time moderate effort. But to get better, I sought out advice from painters who were better than me. I had them critique my work. I got direct feedback every time I put up an auction as far as, what was working and what wasn't. And my goal was to win a Golden Demon, and I did it the year after I set out to do it. But the key is not to try to get better at everything at once, to focus on the fundamentals. If you learn to layer and glaze and refine your lining and brush control, you can do anything. Then it's just practice. But a lot of people who are trying to get better, they try to do everything at once. They want to do directed lighting, they want to get better at NMM, they want to do this and that and the other thing. And they lose focus, and they don't work on their fundamentals. Before you work on NMM and OSL and expect to nail it, you've got to get overhead lighting down in your head. And if you want to get even better at those things, work on your blending and glazing. So if you are having issues with your painting, try to focus. And also look at the list of techniques I have up on my Patreon. I think I have a list of fundamental techniques up there from a while ago. It's like a list of like 8 or 10. Things like lining, layering, glazes, wet blending. There's all these things. And then there's some conceptual techniques. But look at the fundamentals and ask yourself if you think that you're very good at them. And if your answer is that you are not very good at them, practice. Because once you have those fundamental techniques down, seriously, the sky's the limit. Then you just have to wrap your brain around some of the more complicated, concepts of lighting and things. And color. Well, just do it. I mean, isn't the whole story though, right? You can paint for years and never get better. I mean, I meet people like that all the time that feel like they've been stuck in their hobby at the same level for the last 10 years or more. And usually it is a fundamentals thing. It's learning new techniques and mastering new techniques. A little bit blurfy on that. Blurf, blurf, blurf. Luckily the paint was wet enough I can just take it off with some water. There. If you really want to be like those others, focus on your basics. Because those others who are so good spent years working on the basics. Or months, like me. Like I said, I was a decent intermediate level painter, but I didn't know how to layer. I really didn't know how to layer. I was stippling, which now would be, called more advanced because textures, but I was stippling because I couldn't layer. And I didn't know how to glaze, and I was pretty bad at mixing a wash. My brush control was good, and that was probably the one thing that I had going for me, because I had painted for a while, and I also drew and, did canvas, so I was decent at my brush control. But many other things, and I didn't know how NMM at all, and I was still trying to hadn't figured out hair. Hair was the last thing I learned, how to highlight and shade hair so that it looked like hair. Last thing I learned. So then it just took really like sitting down and saying, what does this actually look like? What does, you know, how do people describe doing this? You know, because we didn't have YouTube, so I was trying to kind of reverse engineer people's what layering meant. What did the consistency of dairy product mean? Got so frustrated with that. Just remember it's like the old masters teaching the apprentices. It's like you got to learn the basics. Learn the basics, and then you can break the rules. Because you know how it works and why it works, and you're going to know. It's like not using tomatoes in your chili. Once you know the basics of how to make chili and you understand all your ingredients, then you can figure out how to substitute. Just to bring this whole thing full circle. Yeah, let me... highlight time. Torchlight. But it really is like... It's that. It's, let's see... Torchlight. I'm going to try torchlight plus a little bit of white. One drop. So 4 to 1. Like I say, I always start with 4 drops. Oh no, did I like lose my white? Seriously? Seriously, I took all my white to the other room? I am so ridiculous. All right, 1 second. And I even looked at all the bottles of white on my desk in there, and I'm like, oh, that's a lot of bottles of white. 1 second. And I took those other bottles in there because they were like almost empty, and I had this one full one in here. But apparently my subconscious mind means that I carry pure white with me wherever I go. Hello, Agent Marvel. Hey, Robin. But yes, if you want to get good at anything, basics, fundamentals. And the fundamentals, I mean, they're not boring. You know, learning to layer well gives you beautiful models. So we're going to do a 4 drops of torchlight. Here, Vanna White is going to say, haha, 4 drops of torchlight and 1 drop of pure white. And I'm going to thin this sucker because I put pure white in it. So I'm going to drop 4 drops of water in there. It's almost a 1 to 1. Well, then you're layering. You're either layering or wet blending, depending on your scale. Stefan's World. So that means that you'll want to practice layering. But to do layering, you will have to learn how to think about shadows and highlights as well. So maybe you work with Zenith lighting just to get an idea. Or if you're good at visualizing where your highlights and shadows should be. You know what? I feel like I need more white. Like, there's not enough. Like, there is a difference here. I feel like I want it just a little lighter. So I'm going to drop another pure white in it. The yellow was pretty strong there. And layering is slow. Like, it is a slow technique. So if you get frustrated, then try to wet blend your initial layers like Marika does. And then go to layering. I do it sometimes too. I did it on my underpainting. Don't knock the contrast paint idea though, because remember, I don't know if you have been watching this, but this model, we did the grisaille underpaint on her. I wet blended that grisaille. Like, I did some choppy layering too, but there was a lot of wet blending on there, and then I just put a glaze over the top of it. So essentially I made my own contrast paint. So the contrast paints can teach you a valuable lesson as far as how overlaying a color over another one can change the base color. So it actually has some valuable lessons to teach. Because you can use those. I mean, that's essentially what I did, is I mixed my own contrast paint and put it over the top of that grisaille to get a really awesome skin tone. So I think also the rule if there is another rule, if there is any rule, is to keep an open mind too. Like even dry brushing has its place. And even washes can be useful. Even at a high level. It's just usually if you're doing a wash at a high level, you're usually using it selectively. You're not just putting it on everything. So I'm bringing up the bottom of that lantern, and every time I pop the highlights higher, I get more contrast. Everything stands out a little bit better. And layering is pretty much just painting with washes. Like you're thinning your paint down to that level, but then instead of just putting it over the top, you're going usually from dark to light, although you can go in reverse. But you're painting with that consistency of paint. So as I'm going up here, I'm kind of highlighting around the runes a little bit at this point, so you get kind of a mottled effect. Because pretty soon I'm going to bring in my dark around those runes and outline them. And then I need to be ready to hit the highlights and kind of touch them up. This is the color I'd probably use to do touch-ups if I need them. Yeah, just start at the basic and go up. Learn to do a really smooth, solid base coat easily and cleanly. Practice washes. Learn what that paint consistency looks like. Kind of learn how colors change other colors when you layer them over the top. Practice lining for brush control. And to be able to the same skills you develop for lining are the exact same skills I'm using right here, right now, to highlight the edges of this bracer. Like lining is not just for lining. Lining is for whenever you do a fine detail line on anything. All of these little edge highlights, when I do this little cord, you know, all of these little bones, kind of fragmentation that I put on this texture on the bone staff. All that, same skill as lining, just a different paint color. From lining, then you go to layering. And layering is like going to be the beast because there are many different facets of it, from textures to smooth blending. And again, your lining is your basic skill to lead into layering because it gives you the brush control to execute fine strokes where you need them. And it gives you the understanding of brush control and of unloading your brush. Yeah, and I mean, watching more advanced stuff isn't going to hurt you, Stefan's World, as long as you don't like... What you should do when you're watching anything that I'm doing or any of those other people is just what I outlined to you. Don't say, oh, Anne's painting NMM gold and it looks so good. Say, what technique is Anne using to paint this gold? I'm doing a combination of lining and layering. Except the lining is actually a highlight along the edge instead of outlining a shape. And layering because I'm building up highlights over a darker base. From time to time, I'm doing some wet blending, like right now when I'm trying to wet blend two colors together to get a better transition. And then I might be layering with dark colors when I grab a little bit of my brown liner and russet brown, thin them way down to the point where they are pretty much a wash, and paint in a shadow over here that I need. So it's not a question you know, of just doing NMM then. It's what fundamental techniques are you using to execute this? Those are the techniques that you should learn or improve at if you want to get good at this technique. My highlights are going to get smaller at this point. Much smaller. Because I don't want to wipe out my previous highlight. I want to still leave some of that sticking out. We are almost done. Yep. Hope you feel better. There we go. Little tiny highlights, bringing out all the shinies. And as this gets lighter, we see it looks more shiny. Yeah, I've got to run today because I have to do my grocery store trip and then eat really fast and then get to my vaccination appointment. And I need to mail a mini, the mini that I sold on my Patreon recently. And then I need to get back for coaching. It's just like nonstop running today. There. I've got that light coming up underneath, but it's not as bright as it is up here. I don't think it works that way, Steven's World. Yeah, once you start adding anything with white in and you've got that shadow, that's why it pops, is because it's the drama between the shadow and the highlight crows. So it's less the color that I'm applying and more the difference between it and the color next to it. Yeah, that's why I'm glad I got all my Christmas stuff done. David and I were pretty good about it. Now it's just like being there, like having people in the house and cooking. A little bit more highlight. I'm going to try to finish this highlight before we end the stream here. And then I got to get running. And again, brush control and also very little paint on the brush. Both of which you learn with lining. Even if you decide that later that you don't want to do lining and you'd rather just do natural shadows and contrast to bring out details on your figures, lining is still a good technique to learn because it makes you work on all those other things. There we go. Keep it simple, and most weapons are not super shiny, Agent Marvel. So mostly you're not going to get like really sharp highlight shadow. You're mostly going to get just general light and shadow. Usually with swords, it's in bands. And remember, the top side, or the side the light is coming from, is always going to be generally lighter. I'm using the same technique on this bracelet. The top side of the sword always is lighter. The bottom side is always darker, but you still have bands of light and shadow on both. And it depends on the weapon, too. Axes are always a pain in the butt. I just did a PDF on axes for coaching. Or partially addressed axes. So I can't go too much into it because we're right at the end of the stream here. But every weapon is different because every one is like tilted differently toward the source, and every one is shaped slightly differently. Just gonna bring that up a little. And I need that darker shadow back there. Yeah, Ian. Yeah, Ian. Kuro 2-brush, yep. It's hard to, sadly, it's difficult to like break down how to paint NMM weapons like at the end of the stream, Agent Marvel. Sorry about that. But yeah, since we don't really have one, I mean, we're gonna do metallics there. So we're not on NMM weapons right now with any of our models. Sadly. But I mean, NMM is the same kind of principle, and learning to adapt it to different surfaces is really the whole challenge of the technique. Is each surface going to be a little bit different. Each surface is going to be positioned a bit different in relation to its surroundings. It's like weapons are no different than any other part of NMM, but you have to break down the shape and where your light is coming from. Shape of the surface and the light. It also helps if you have a sword or a dagger, like from Renaissance fairs. I actually have a Tai Chi sword. When I really wonder, I actually take it out into the light and I look at it. Or I'll have David hold it and I'll take a photo and see what I can see where the light tends to hit, be real general about it. So if you have like even like a carving knife or a slicing knife, you could try to use that, see how the light acts on it. Like I do honestly do that from time to time. When I'm in doubt, I always try to find a metal thing that's kind of the right shape, and I put it under my lights and I look at it. All right, I think we are set, guys. We didn't quite get to the final white highlight on the gold and brass colors, but we are close. We definitely like are getting close on this guy. Like a lot of what we have left is like potion vials and leather. A little bit of silver here and there. Yeah, I don't like to grayscale it because I think that it's useful to remember that the environment is reflected in weapons and armor. And if you don't have that, it's going to look a little fake. It's going to look like an illustration, a black and white illustration. So although the grayscale can be useful for isolating shadows and highlights, it also like gets you thinking just in monochrome. And you get much more realistic NMM if you introduce a little bit of color here and there. But yeah, so it depends on what you're having trouble with, probably. But yeah, all right. Alrighty, guys, that's what we did today. We did some gold. We did some gold using the Dungeon Adventure set Fast Palette Color Torchlight, which is my new favorite NMM yellow. Yes. Yeah, it can. It can show contrast. For sure. I always took pictures at the Renaissance Fair. Helps me think about it. All right, so this is Monday. What's on next? Yeah, I was going to say it's Rhonda Day. And tomorrow is Bust Day. So we're going to continue working on her skin. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I am going to go off and traipse about, do all my stuff. And I will see you all tomorrow morning, bright and shiny. All right? Have a good one.